Briar Stewart joins us with the details. So, Briar, what do we know?
Well, we know that after 9 hours of talks in Saudi Arabia between Ukrainian officials and U.S. officials, there is support for what they're calling an interim 30-day ceasefire. Now, this is something that Ukraine hadn't proposed going into the meeting. Going into the meeting, they talked about a partial ceasefire, one that would stop attacks from the air and by the sea. But it appears that the U.S. Had pushed the Ukrainians further than that. And what U.S. officials are saying about this proposal is that if it's agreed to by Russia, which is, of course, a big caveat. Moscow still has to agree to this. But if it is agreed upon, that means the fighting would stop and the real talks could begin, because really the big challenge in all of this is going to be finding some kind of lasting, peaceful settlement. But the big news here is really that there seems to be more momentum from Ukraine and, of course, the United States to move towards this ceasefire. And I think it's worth noting just how, the relationship between the U.S. and Ukraine have kind of, ebbed and flowed over the last 10 days or so. I mean, there was that fractious Oval Office meeting, and where after that, the Americans halted military aid. They curbed the sharing of military intelligence. Big blows for Ukraine. Those measures have now been lifted after these meetings. So while these talks today were being billed as another step towards peace, I think a big part of it was Ukraine being able to show the Americans that it's serious about negotiations and trying to repair some of that relationship.
Briar, it was interesting to listen to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio really kind of putting this, it would seem, on Russia and saying the number one thing that Russia could do right now is say yes to the goodwill offer that the Ukrainians have made, that Ukrainians are ready to stop the fighting. I mean, that is, in normal times, that would be, you would expect a U.S. Secretary of State to say that. But as you say, so does this is just not, these aren't normal times. So is this showing that the U.S. and Ukraine are now back on side?
Yeah, I think there will be a lot of analysis of what has played out over the last week and a half and some of the kind of the different posturing and leverage at play. But absolutely right now, and they said it at that short press conference, that the ball is absolutely in Moscow's court. And what Marco Rubio had said at one point was that if Russia doesn't agree to it, then there's an indication of who is the real impediment to peace here. And of course, this comes the same day that Ukraine launched a massive drone attack on the Moscow area, the largest of the war so far. At least 30 people were killed. And a Ukrainian official had actually come out and said that part of this was sending a message, trying to pressure Russia to agree to what they proposed as a partial ceasefire, what Ukraine had proposed. But now, as I mentioned, it appears that the U.S. has pushed further, and they have this proposal on the table, but Russia does have to agree to it. And Steve Witkoff, who is the Trump administration's special envoy, actually for the Middle East, but he's also taken on this portfolio as well. He will be headed to Moscow later this week. So there could be some developments on this quite quickly.
Thank you. That's the CBC's Briar Stewart live in London.